All right, so I think we can get going. We'll just let people in as they jump on. So, hello, welcome. Thanks for coming along to the Graze workshop number 3. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you here into my home kitchen, and to spend the next hour talking about healthy gut, healthy you. So before we kick off much further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respect to elders past, present, and future. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ben Mack. I have been a chef now for 15 years. I've been quite lucky to work across a range of restaurants and countries, New Zealand, all around Australia, and Europe. Some of the most recent ones in Melbourne were Supernormal, Cumulus, and Oak Ridge out in the Yarra Valley. And all throughout my cooking career, I've always been interested in this idea of sustainability. And central to this idea of sustainability is this question that's always underpinning my thoughts, and it's, how might we bring about a better world through food? How can we use food to improve people's lives, to improve the natural environment, and to build stronger communities? And so that question has kind of led down a few unusual paths. And so while I have been cooking professionally, also been studying, so went to RMIT and did a Bachelor of Social Science Environment, and I'm currently actually in London doing a Masters of Food Policy. It's 7:30 in the morning here, so nice and fresh. Hopefully it looks like a beautiful day. It's going to be an absolute amazing one. And so along this journey, I've started off a couple of small businesses, and one of them is the Social Food Project. And so we're all about bringing together people through catering and food events, and connecting that with sustainability education. It's lots of different iterations. Catering, cooking workshops, different food projects, pop-ups, and the like. But one of the main ones that we do are these cooking workshops, or these cooking demos. So this series originally was meant to be hosted in person, obviously, down at the City of Melbourne Library at the Docks. The program was funded through the library services and the health department. So thanks to those two departments for making this possible, and originally intended for international students, and thinking about how we can better have international students learn about food and engage with Melbourne as a food city. Of course, now with COVID, everything's online, which in a way has been really good, because we've got some 220 people booked for today's session. And the original workshops were only having 30, so it's good to be able to stretch it out a little bit more. So hello from Canada, love that. Hey Corey. And so here we are. So a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into it. So this session will last for around about an hour. We'll do a little bit of chit chat at the beginning for 5 to 10 minutes. Then we'll do around about 45 minutes of cooking. And hopefully have 5 minutes or so at the end for some questions. If you have any questions throughout the session, then please pop it into the chat box that you see in the side. You can find that just if you hover over your screen, down the bottom there, there's a little button that says chat. Hello from India. Wow, this truly is an international demo today. That's very cool. And so I'll have this chat box open. Tassie, Team Australia, love it. And so if you've got any questions or comments or ideas, then I would love for you to share that with myself and with the group. There's always this idea, lots of people have ideas and knowledge and inspiration about food and about cooking, and I'd love to hear your ideas as well as sharing mine. So it'd be great if you can pop in some questions as we go. Cool. And then the last thing is that at the end of this, we're going to send out a survey. Thank you for those who filled out the survey last week. It's really helpful. The point of it is that it actually helps us to evaluate these sorts of programs. And so if you do like this session and you say so in the survey, then it means that these sorts of programs can continue on into the future. They're more likely to happen again. So if you do like today, then it'd be great if you can fill out that survey just so we can get a better evaluation out of it. All right, there's a few more people dribbling in, but let's get down into it. All right, so what are we talking about here? Today we are talking about healthy gut. Now, what is this? What is this thing? People talk about, you know, this healthy gut, this healthy microbiome is a thing that's important for us. And so there's all sorts of research now to show that when you have a healthy gut microbiome, then you have all sorts of other wonderful health benefits. Our bodies are absolutely teeming with bacteria and yeast and fungi and viruses and all sorts of wonderful things. It's a fun fact for you. You have 30 trillion human cells in your body, and you have 40 trillion bacterial cells. So you are, in fact, more bacteria than you are human. How's that? Some of these bacteria are good for you, and some of them are bad for you. Some of the bad ones can cause diseases. They can cause all sorts of issues with your stomach and have impact on your immune system and other general health. But the good ones are an essential part of keeping us happy and healthy. They, said before, they drive your immune system. They break down fiber in the body and make nutrients more available. And there's also lots of research to show now that it connects to mental health and to having a healthy brain as well. And so the idea here is that we want to try to encourage these good types of bacteria. Where do we get this stuff from? So a lot of it comes from when we're very young, from birth and from in the womb, but a big part of it comes from our diet. And so there's kind of there's lots of ways in which you can improve your gut health. The three big ones are eating lots of plants, so lots of fresh fruits and vegetables do the job. Eating whole grains, pulses and grains and the like. And then the last one is fermented foods. And so today we are going to be focusing on ferments, fermented foods, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. Absolutely love it. I'm still a bit of a student as far as fermenting food goes, but have been playing around a little bit over the last few years, and it's such a wonderful activity to do. So the recipe that we're going to be making today is we're going to make some kimchi, which is a wonderful Korean fermented product. If anyone's had that, know how wonderful it is. We're going to then turn that kimchi into kimchi pancakes. We're going to cook that up into this delicious pancake base, and then we're going to make a little herb salad, and with that we're going to dress it with a kombucha vinaigrette, which is going to be a fun little treat, a little twist. All right, so let's get into it. So how do we make this stuff, this kimchi stuff? So there's, you know, 1,000,001 different recipes on how to do this. The basic ingredients are cabbage. Now, your traditional recipes call for a napa cabbage or a wombok, depending on where you are. That has a lot of good liquid in it, a lot of good moisture, and that helps to draw out and create a brine that we want to create this fermented product. But you can absolutely use other types of cabbage. So we've got this one here is called a sweet cabbage here in the UK. I think otherwise it might be called a cone cabbage. Regular old white cabbage, some carrot, some spring onions, and some ginger. So what we want to do is start off, we want to take off these outer leaves and we're going to reserve them on the side. I'm only going to make one sort of this size jar worth of kimchi. So I'll just chop up a little bit as we go, not using the whole lot. Now, again, there's lots of different ways that you can do this. A lot of recipes will ask you to keep it whole, or in at least kind of quarters or big segments. That absolutely works. What I actually find is that if you chop it up a bit smaller, then it starts to ferment. It ferments a little bit more quickly, And also it means that when you use it on the other side, it's already kind of chopped up and it's a little bit easier to work with on the other side. So we'll put in a little bit of that cone cabbage, and then we'll put in a little bit of this regular white cabbage. So what actually is fermenting? Fermenting is essentially, it's an ancient technique of preservation. Originally, it was really just around making your food last longer. And from a more biological perspective, it's where you have bacteria convert carbohydrates, so starches and sugars, into either ethanol, CO2, or particular types of acids. Now, these acids or alcohols can be really beneficial for your gut health, and they also create the acids actually act as a preserving agent that will make your food last longer. Now, lots of different types of fermented foods out there that you would have heard of. You know, kimchi, the one that we're making today, is quite common. Sauerkraut, yogurt, even things like beer is a ferment. Wine, cheese is a particular type of ferment, and sourdough. Those are some of the popular and well-known different types of fermented foods. And so all we're really doing, and if anyone was here 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the food in your mood, we made the fermented chili recipe. We're going to follow that very similar path today. And so the type of bacteria that we're trying to encourage is called lactobacillus, or lactic acid bacteria. The same one that we use with our fermented chili, and it's the same one that is quite commonly found throughout a lot of these traditional fermented products, including yogurt. And so how do we do that? We do that by creating, by two things, by creating a salt level or a brine in which these lactic acid bacteria can reproduce. And so if you remember back, then we want to add a brine that's 2 to 4% salt by weight. And then the other thing is that you want to create an anaerobic environment. And that means that we want to try to eliminate the oxygen. So there's lots of different types of yeasts and bacteria in the world. Some of them require oxygen in order to reproduce, and some of them don't require oxygen. And so for this particular fermentation product, we want to encourage the lab, which is the no oxygen bacteria. A couple of questions here. Can we add bok choy? Absolutely. So one of the best things about kimchi is that you can basically add anything you like. A traditional recipe will have daikon or other kinds of radishes in there. That adds a nice kind of punchy pepperiness. But literally, you can use lots and lots of different things. When I was working at Supernormal, we did a Kimchi Kohlrabi. So just cutting out kohlrabi sticks, salting them up, and then making a paste and putting it together. And at Oak Ridge, we did a coastal greens kimchi, which was pretty neat. So we did like saltbush and pig's face and samphire and all these kind of wonderful coastal greens. We turned that into kimchi, which was pretty cool. So it's really can come down to what you can find and even just what you've got kicking around. It's if you've just got a box of carrots and you need to preserve them for a little bit longer, if you're not going to have a chance to eat them, then you can absolutely turn them into kimchi. Do you need certain ratios of the vegetables? Good question. So no, not necessarily. You can kind of go wild and turn it out. Whatever vegetables you want, you can add. It's more about the salt levels that you add to the mix. And so we'll get to that in a little bit. There's a small piece of spring onion hitting in front of your chopping board. Oh, thank you. Very kind. Thanks for watching my back. Okay, so another really important ingredient is this here, ginger. That's going to add a really beautiful punchy kick and make things really nice. Now you would have seen that, you know, there's these particular cuts called a julienne cut, where it turns into these beautiful fine sort of matchstick things. They can be a little bit difficult to chop or intimidating, So I'll show you the way that I like to do it. So I just like to, I like to square it up, cut off most of the skin, but a bit of skin isn't going to kill you. And then you want to cut it down into sheets, as skinny as you can. I reckon that's enough for our purposes. Now you have your sheets of your ginger, and if you actually keep it together, you put it on your board, and then you sort of like fan it out. So it creates this kind of fan. I'm not sure if you guys can see that very easily. And that helps to kind of stick it together. And then you can just run your knife from the top all the way through, and it sort of stops it from moving around. It gets, and it gets it into this really nice, skinny, thin chop without too much effort at the end. And then you end up with these kind of beautiful matchstick ginger cuts, which is absolutely delightful. Same thing with a carrot. So in a lot of, when I was going to culinary school and when I was in restaurants, you had to cut a julienne cut, and they made you chop off all the skin. You had to square it up, so there was 30-40% worth of waste. I don't really like that. So you can do the same thing. I normally just cut it onto an angle. Try not to let it run away from you. Cut it onto an angle like that, trying to keep it all together. And then you get your sheets that are all cut up, fan it out onto your board. You can just kind of do a little bit of an artificial fan like that. Just down here. And then go from the top and chop it straight down. And you end up with a very similar product to if you were, trimming off all the edges and keeping it to that sort of French tradition. And you end up with this beautiful, kind of nice, fine, julienne style cut for your cabbage. Pretty neat. All right, couple of, will I make this session available at the end? Yes, absolutely. So we are recording this session, and the library at the Docks will be putting this on their YouTube channel, so you guys can watch it afterwards as well. That's a lot of veggies. I hope it can fit in your small jar. I hope so too. Let's find out, shall we? You'll be amazed at how much you can squish into a little jar, but you can always save a little bit for later on, guys. That's fine. All right, so the next step. So now, when doing research for this, there's found it, like I said, 1,000 different recipes for kimchi. A lot of them will ask you to salt your kimchi for 8 or 10 hours. You put in half a cup of salt to 4 cabbages, and you let it sit, rinse it off, and then you add other things afterwards. I find that it's a little bit imprecise, and it's a little bit kind of wild card. How big is a cabbage? I've got a little one over here. How much salt do you actually need? And then sort of mulling through it, what I found is what's actually happening is you add a lot of salt at the beginning, try to wash it all off, and then you add more salty products at the end. So you add the fish paste, you add fish sauce, you might add some soy sauce. And so you're sort of taking salt out, putting salt in. It's sort of a little bit of a process like that. I wanted to make it really simple for us today. And so we're going to just do your classic lacto fermentation of 2% salt by weight. I don't rinse it. I keep it all inside, and that seems to work really well for me. So what we want to do is we get our scales and we put in a second bowl and we hit tear. Now we make sure that says 0, and then we pour in our ingredients. And that comes to 480 grams. Now what's 2% of 480 grams, guys? Let's ask Mr. Google phone. 480 times 0.02 is 9.6 grams. And so the idea here is that you want a 2% per weight. 480 is 9.6. So then you press tear again. That's on 0. And then you add your salt until you get to 9.6, or this is probably going to be 10 grams by the time we get there. And that's that. Nice and simple. Now, the only other ingredient, apart from the chili, which I'm going to add a little bit later, that I'll add at this point, is a little bit of sugar. And so the sugar actually helps to, I'm going to put in about 1 teaspoon. The sugar helps to kickstart the process. So if you remember before, this bacteria eats these starches and these sugars as carbohydrates and turns it into the acids that we're looking for. And so by adding a little bit of sugar at the start, it's going to really kickstart that fermentation process, and it's going to end up being absolutely delicious. All right, so this is the fun part of this process, and it is the squishing. So this is a little bit more challenging when you're sat down, but what you want to do is really just squish the cabbage together with the salt. So the salt is mixing with the cabbage, and it's drawing out a lot of that moisture. So you would have seen this technique that the salt draws out a lot of the moisture. It's the same process as if you were drying, if you were doing a dried meat or like a dried salmon or something like that. It just pulls out the moisture from the cell. And so what we're doing here as well is we are creating a salty brine with the own juice of the cabbage. So that 2% worth of salt is combining with the liquid that comes out of the cabbage, and it's creating its own brine. And so if we remember back from before, one of the conditions that we need for this lacto fermentation is no air. And so by keeping the product submerged in a brine, in that 2% brine, then you're eliminating the air and you're increasing your bacterial growth for the lab. So Candy, how do you calculate the percentage again? So it's a 2% weight. So if you have 1 kilo worth of ingredients, so 1 kilo worth of cabbage and carrot and everything weighed up, then it's 20 grams of salt. So the way that you can calculate it if you've got it on your phone is just by putting in the number, so the weight, so whatever it was, 500 grams times 0.02. So that's 2%, and it gives you the amount of salt that you want at the end. All right, so we're starting to get there. See, it's quite a good workout for me with my good. I don't have to do shoulders today. There's this wonderful Korean idea, this saying, which is called, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, which is called sun mat, and it generally translates to the flavor of your hands, or more specifically, the flavor of your mother's hands. And so the idea, from a romantic sense, is that when you're cooking with your hands, you actually impart a lot of the love, a lot of the care, a lot of the thought, and your own personal sort of flavor or signature into that food. Such a beautiful romantic idea. From a biological perspective, your hands are teeming with different types of bacteria, and so you're transferring it onto the cabbage. So you're actually kick-starting this fermentation process by adding more bacteria. Might sound a little bit freaky and creepy, but you don't have to worry about that. But because we're adding that salt level, a lot of the bad bacteria can't grow in that 2% brine, whereas the good stuff, the lactic acid bacteria, that's gonna reproduce really nicely. So it's gonna turn out to be absolutely perfect. Nice idea. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly wash my hands so we don't sort of go everywhere. I can show you this wonderful cabbage. All right, so now you can see that that it's quite squished up. We've got a little bit of moisture coming out of it, but not heaps. That's going to be fine. By the time we squash it down, it should all be absolutely perfect. So now we add the main chili component. I've just got one more person. So we've got this wonderful stuff here called Gochujang. Now this is, you can call it a similar product to Japanese miso, but it also has heaps and heaps of chili in it. So it's a fermented soybean product. It's got a little bit of fermented rice flour, lots and lots of chili, and it's this absolutely beautiful, amazing kind of red chili paste, quite thick, and so delicious. If anyone's had any Korean food before, your bibimbabs or your that sort of thing, then you probably will recognize this flavor, and it's absolutely stellar. So for 500 grams, which was around about what we used for this, I like to put in 2 tablespoons of this gochujang. That gives a nice punchy kick, but not too intense. You don't want to be too crazy. You still want to be able to eat it. Couple of questions here. Yep, gone too far. So, particular type of salt. So I like to just use regular table salt. So I find it's quite clean. It's quite pure. I have done, because trying to think about heart health, I have tried to do some ferments with low sodium salt, and actually find it doesn't work quite as well. So I typically will go with regular table salt. When I'm cooking normally, I use sea flaky salt, which I find is a little bit milder and softer. But for these recipes, especially if you're doing it by weight, a 2% weight, then using regular salt is a good way to keep it nice and consistent. How much sugar? So that was just one teaspoon. So it's just a little bit of sugar. That just helps to kick it off, really. A lot of the sugars are in fact going to be converted into the lab and into the acid. So it's not going to end up being a very sweet dish. Should you put in leek or spring onion? So that was just a little bit of spring onion. That just helps to keep things nice and punchy and brings a really beautiful flavor. Thanks, Sharon. You're doing my job for me. So is that just normal Korean chili paste? It depends on what you define normal, I guess, but there's lots and lots of different varieties. So just like miso, there's some 10 different types of miso out there. The same with this Korean chili paste. So they all have their own sort of unique flavor, and that will, that'll add make a nice little difference for your kimchi. Every single time can be different. All right, so last but not least, we add in the chili, and let's see, let's have a look at that. Hello, that's starting to look like kimchi, isn't it? Amazing. Now, if you were doing the rinse and add method, then this is the time when you would add any kind of fish sauce or soy sauce, or shrimp paste is quite commonly found in traditional kimchis. Again, I like to keep it quite simple. I like to keep it vegan, just in case I have some friends over and they can't eat any kind of fish paste. Obviously not having friends over at the moment though, guys, are we? No, not doing that. But just in general. And it also, I find it's more versatile. So if you add soy sauce, then it can flavor a dish. Whereas this, with just the chili and the vegetables, you can make it quite versatile. Is there an alternative for gluten-free options? Gochujang has malt. Okay, barley malt powder. Not sure. Good question. Not sure. That's definitely, well, actually, yes. So you can just use chili flakes. There's a special stuff called Korean chili flakes, it's quite a fine, a bright red product, and you can absolutely use that instead of the paste. Just bear in mind that as you're removing some of the moisture, some of the liquid from the product, and so you might need to add a little bit of water just to get it going. All right, now let's see if we have got our ratios okay. Now, what were we saying about that being just a huge amount of cabbage? There's no way that it's all going to fit into the jar. But guys, it's if anything, I did not make enough. That is basically what we're left with. That's it. It's all done. Gonskis. Do you need to sanitize your jar? I always forget to tell people to sanitize the jars. Yes, you absolutely need to sanitize the jars. I did this morning. So if you just put a pot of water on the stove, pop it in there, pop the jar in there and boil it for 5 minutes and then leave it to air dry. What I would typically do is leave the lid ajar and then and then turn it on its side so that the air can get inside and outside. You don't want to put it flat on the surface, or else the steam and stuff can get trapped a little bit inside. All right, so now, do you remember from before our wonderful outer leaves? This is where these guys come into play. So, like I was saying before, the key thing here is to try to keep everything submerged in the underneath the brine. And so to do that, we want to keep it pushed down, and so that the liquid is coming up above. And so as you can see, I'll do it like this. When you push down, you can see that there's all that beautiful liquid that's coming up to above the leaf. And so that outer leaf is going to make sure that the kimchi is secure, is submerged. Close it up, bam, kimchi. Well, not quite yet. Now we need to wait. So typically, you need to ferment kimchi. I normally would leave this for 10 days. So that's my classic amount of time for any kind of fermented product like this. 10 days, 10 to 14 even. You can eat it. You can eat it after less. You can eat it after 3 days. Some people like to do that. The longer that you leave it, the funkier it gets. And so, you know, I actually have some kimchi, which we're going to use for this recipe, by the way. I'm not going to make you wait for 10 days until we can make these pancakes. That's sort of 6 weeks old, and it's starting to get quite nice and funky. In fact, let's bring it out. So this is my kimchi from 6 weeks ago, from the 14th of the 4th. And so you can see that the color has changed quite a bit, sort of mellowed out. It's a little bit of a duller orange, but the flavor is absolutely amazing. And it's got this, it's hard to describe what fermented foods actually smell like, this kind of beautiful, well-rounded, slightly funky, alive kind of aroma with the chili. And I normally pack in quite a bit of ginger as well. So this has got a really nice gingery punch. A couple of other questions. So how long can this be stored for? So because this is a living product, after the fermentation process of 10 to 14 days, you want to transfer it to the fridge. All of your lab bacteria will continue to reproduce. And then after a long time, it will start to get really funky, and maybe more funky than actually what we're looking for and what we want to eat. So pop it into the fridge. I'll eat it for a couple of months if I keep it into the fridge. I throw the jar. Yep, nice. Sure. Yep, that's a good one. Is you can put it into the dishwasher. If you've got a really hot dishwasher, then that can be good. Is the outer layer leaf to be eaten? No. So the purpose of this outer leaf is really just to keep the kimchi submerged below the liquid. So we don't want to eat this. When it's time to put this away, I'll normally take out the leaf and put it to the side. So because there's, like I was saying before, there's particular types of bacteria that need oxygen to grow, and there's some that don't need oxygen. A lot of the ones that do need oxygen to grow are not good for us, so they can make us feel sick. And so it's at that kind of intersection between being submerged in the liquid and being open to the air that you can get some bacterial growth. So I always just throw out that top leaf just in case there is any kind of nasty stuff growing on there. Terry, is it necessary to put chili in? No, otherwise then it's basically sauerkraut. If you chopped it up small, put in your 2% salt, maybe some mustard seeds, then all of a sudden you've basically got sauerkraut. That's what it is. And there we go. All right, so I'm just a little bit aware of time, so we're going to have to charge ahead, and we're going to make some of these kimchi pancakes. We can come back to some of these questions towards the end as well. So now, when I was coming up with this recipe, you can use lots and lots of different wild ingredients to make kimchi pancakes. You know, lots and lots of different variations. I wanted to keep it nice and simple, and trying to use ingredients that we have kicking around the house. So I have some self-raising flour that's going to go in. That's 1 cup with self-raising flour. Then I have half a cup of corn flour. I find that the corn flour in this recipe helps to keep it really nice and crispy and fresh, and kind of adds it's a little bit of a drier texture, and it just ends up being quite a nice recipe. Then we have some milk. Now again, milk might not be a traditional sort of Japanese pancake recipe, but I wanted to show you a nice kind of recipe base so that you can use it in lots of different ways. So that was half a cup of the milk, and then last but not least is one beautiful free-range egg. So this particular base for pancakes is actually super versatile. You can make any kind of pancake or fritter using this particular recipe. This base, you can, like I say, you can basically add anything that you like. I was doing some tests around, and you can use it with some corn fritters. You can do it with pea fritters, some zucchini fritters. They're really nice. Actually, might just add a little bit more milk to that. Seems to have been a little bit thicker than the one that I made yesterday, funnily enough. And so you just want it to be a reasonably sort of kind of semi-loose kind of pancake mixture, which I will show you as I get this going. So you want it to kind of look a little bit like that. So next up, a little bit hard to mix this while I'm sitting down, but we will get there. So next up is our kimchi. Now for the 1.5 cups of flour to the, that's probably sort of almost 1 cup worth of milk now, I'm going to put in 2 cups of my kimchi. You can basically add as much or as little ingredients, wet ingredients or dry ingredients to this as you like. If you like a really, vegetable packed sort of pancake or fritter, then you can absolutely do more. It really comes down to personal preference. And now you can see that has turned into this beautiful kind of kimchi pancake. Delicious. All right, so now the best way that I've found to cook these pancakes is in a pan. I'm using a cast iron pan because that's what works on my induction. But if you've got a non-stick pan, then that will also work really, really well. I find that you get the most success by doing this on a medium heat. So I have this on, the maximum for this particular induction is 2000. Don't really know what temperature that is, but that's on 600. So it's around about 1/3 of the hottest temperature. And that will, just do a little test to check how hot it is. Yep, perfect. That will make sure that the pancakes are being cooked out nice and evenly, and it's not coloring too quickly. If you do put it on too hot and too high, then you might find that that it starts to color too much. It starts to burn a little bit down on the bottom before it's actually cooking through. So you want to just have a look and keep an eye on this one, and make sure that that you're not cooking things too quickly or too slowly. Perfect. All right, a couple of quick questions. Is it critical to intermittently open the cover of the purge? Yes, exactly. So there's this process called burping. So because we are in an anaerobic environment without oxygen, we are creating CO2. And so what can happen is that if you keep the lid on too tight, then some of that carbon can build up, and it can actually explode if you're not careful. These sorts of jars are not perfectly airtight, and so And so I don't think they're ever going to actually explode. But so you want to do this process called birthing, and that just realistically just means opening it up and letting out that air every day or second day across the 10 when you're going. All right, so we've just got 15 minutes left, so let's go into this. I haven't actually used this cast iron that much. Seems to be a few hot spots in the middle, but I'm sure everything's going to work out perfectly. So, kombucha. Let me introduce you to my wonderful kombucha. This is one of my little pride and joys. Been making kombucha for the last couple of months, and it's an absolute pleasure. What is this stuff? So kombucha is made from this thing called SCOBY. So SCOBY is an acronym for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. It's basically all of the good stuff that we like, that we want to encourage, that keeps our guts nice and healthy and our bodies ticking along nicely. Actually, when I was researching this, I found a really wonderful description of what SCOBY is. I'm going to read it to you. So SCOBY is a gelatinous cellulose-based biofilm or microbial mat found floating at the container's air-liquid interface. I think that's really nice. It's kind of like a little bit of biological poetry for you guys this afternoon. And so just keep an eye on this so I don't burn it and embarrass myself in front of everyone. And so the way that it works, just like most fermentation products, is that it converts the sugar into our alcohol, ethanol, and CO2 and acids. And so the way that SCOBY feeds is that you make a tea. So you need to make either a black tea or a green tea with some sugar in it. So for this particular recipe, I use 8 bags of green tea for 2 liters of water. So it's like 8 cups for 8 bags. And then I put in 160 grams of honey for this particular one. You brew it up, half an hour worth of steeping. So it's quite a strong tea. And then you let it cool right down. And then you add it to a container. You put in your beautiful SCOBY mother. And then over the period of, again, 10 to 14 days, that seems to be the magic number, is when it starts to convert all those sugars from the tea into this beautiful beverage. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you'll notice that it's air open on the top. And so it's a combination of aerobic and anaerobic fermentation happening at the same time. Let's have a quick look at this little guy. Oh yeah, that's coming together nicely. And so as we, it's going to be beautiful. And so when we're making this product, you go through 2 fermentation processes. The first one is open to the air, so that's aerobic. And then after 10 to 14 days, you take it away and you put it into a sealed container, such as one of these. And then you do a second fermentation with the lid closed and you create the anaerobic fermentation. In this second part, this is where you add all of your delicious flavors, and you want to add a little bit more sugar, and that creates, sort of activates the fermentation process again, and it creates lots of CO2 and creates a beautiful carbonated beverage. Now, if you happen to leave your kombucha, now no one will ever forget about your kombucha, but if you were to do that, then lo and behold, what actually happens is that this liquid underneath turns out to be something very, very similar to vinegar. It continues to create these acids. It continues to put the good lab bacteria in there, and it turns into this product very similar to vinegar. And so when I was working out at Oak Ridge with Matt Stone and Joe Barrett, one of the things that they would do is they would intentionally leave their kombucha to go into this vinegar stage and then use it as a base for a vinaigrette. And so that's what we're going to do today. Put that back over there. And so this here is some vinegar that I have made intentionally. That was for 20 days. So I left the batch sitting with his inside the liquid for 20 days. and then put it into this bottle. I actually put a little bit of extra honey in this end, just to kind of sweeten it up, and that is going to become our wonderful vinaigrette. So what else is going in this vinaigrette? So we've got a little bit of mustard, we've got a little bit of honey, we've got a little bit of this stuff here called Kefir, which is our yogurt friend counterpart. Very similar, but Kefir is actually more action-packed. It's got more protein. It's got more of this good lab bacteria, so it's really killer. And so what we're going to do, woo, hear that? It's alive. It's happening. You can even see it starting to like foam up a little bit. It's pretty cool. So for any kind of dressing, what I like to do is just pop in around about half a cup. I'm sure I'll make this recipe properly for you guys. Put in your half a cup of your quote unquote vinegar, your kombucha vinegar. I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon of mustard. It's going to create a really beautiful flavor. I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon of honey. That's just going to balance it out. And then I'm going to put in a spoon of this wonderful kefir. So, as I was saying before, kefir, it's a very similar product to yogurt. It's a little bit wetter. So as you can see, it's more of a yogurty kind of drink. And so that can be really good for certain things, but it's not quite as versatile as your yogurt, which is a little bit thicker. You can use it for lots of different things. But like I said, it's higher in protein, it's higher in fat as well, but it's got a lot of these beautiful these different types of bacteria. So it's really, really good for you. You can have a go on that. We're making sure that we don't burn our wonderful kimchi fritters here, guys. We're doing well. And so you'll notice that it's taking quite a long time to cook these, and that's intentional. We want to keep it on a low heat so it cooks the flour all the way through, so you create this really nice crispy pancake. All right, so next up is our friend, the stick blender. So we're going to do an emulsion. So it's the same process as what you would do if you were making a mayonnaise. You basically put in exactly the same stuff as this, but you put in also an egg yolk or a whole egg if you're making a whole egg mayonnaise. And so what we want to do is put our stick blender in, zhuzh that up, and then get our oil and slowly but surely emulsify it into the mix. And so what this does, hopefully you can hear me, is that it just it emulsifies and it slightly thickens the vinaigrette so that it sticks to whatever it is that we're putting in there. And that there looks very good for me. Now, when you're making a vinaigrette, you want to think about a couple of things. So, in fact, when you're making any type of food, you want to be thinking about how you're keeping your flavor pillars in balance. And so I always talk about this idea that there's 3 flavor pillars, and actually depending on what sort of culinary tradition you come from, there's often 4 or 5 or more. But I always got taught there's 3 flavor pillars, and they are salt, sweet, and acidic. And so the idea is that when you have all of these 3 pillars in balance, and they are all at the same level, then you create food which is absolutely delicious. It stimulates your palate. It makes you go, oh, yum, that's really nice. I want to eat that. And so when you're thinking about saltiness, of course, you can add salt, but you can also add soy sauce. You can add, saltbush. You can add mustard is a little bit salty. Other types of products to get that. Same with sweetness, of course, you can add sugar, but you can also add stevia or honey or fruit or sweet vegetables, for example, carrots or sweet potato. And then for your acid, you can, of course, use vinegar, but you can also use lemon juice, overbrewed kombucha, and other things like that. But the idea always is that you want to taste. So you always want to try your product, whatever it is, taste it. And as you're tasting, you think to yourself, oh, that's actually really nice. It's good. You want to think to yourself, how are these levels? How's the saltiness? How's the sweetness? How's the acid? And I think for myself, I didn't put any salt in there, so I'm going to put in a little bit of salt. And that is an absolutely beautiful vinaigrette. Put that in a jar, keep it in the fridge. If this was cold, then the oil, if you've got good olive oil, then it will solidify slightly and it will become slightly thicker. And so that can be really good as well. Now, what is this vinaigrette going on to? We're not just going to drop it straight onto the pancakes. I have prepared a little fresh salad. So in here we have some watercress, this little guy, very nice, and some fresh herbs, some mint and some coriander as well. Now these pancakes are pretty much looking delightful. Let's crank it up a little bit, get a little bit more color on them. The pancakes obviously have been cooked in oil in a pan, and so we want to think about how we can add some fresh relief to the dish. Anything that's kind of quite sort of flour based or oily, then you want to think about adding some freshness to balance it out. And so the herbs will do that. Also, let's put in some cucumber. So I'm just going to chop up a few thin slices of this cucumber, put it into our salad, and it is time for us to start thinking about plating this beauty up. I'm going to call that done. So you get your wonderful pancakes. See there, hopefully. No, you can't see. I'm going to put it back over here. That they've got a nice caramelization, and that has come together very, very nicely. I'm going to put a few extra little bits of the kimchi in here because that is going to create even more bursting flavor and just get that really beautiful sort of gingery pop coming through. And then a little bit of our dressing onto our herb salad. Don't want to do too much. And that's going to add a beautiful, fresh kind of burst of flavor that's going to go really nicely with our kimchi pancakes. It's going to offer that fresh relief. And then I'm just going to take this beautiful salad, pop it on top very nicely. You can make a little hat. Get a couple more of these beautiful cucumbers. Pop them around. And guys, we've done it. We have created, within 1 hour flat, some wonderful kimchi pancakes with fresh kimchi that we've made ourselves, a fresh herb salad, and a kombucha vinaigrette. Wham bam, how good is that? So delicious. And that's that. And now we have a stack of questions to go through. So let's have a look at some of these questions. So what is a vegan alternative for egg? You can get egg substitute when you're making pancakes or fritters. Another good one is you can use aquafaba. That helps to thicken things up. Aquafaba acts in a similar way to egg whites when it's whipped. And so that can be a really nice substitute. Maybe chia seeds. Thanks, Amanda. That's a, yep, chickpea liquid. So that's the aquafaba. That's a great way that you can use that. Does the heat not kill the good bacteria? That's a good question, actually. I don't know the answer to that question. I would assume actually that it would knock off some of the bacteria, but you've got so much in it that it's still going to be good. And then of course you've got the fresh kimchi around it as well, so it should balance it out. So we've got one question about what about white tea for the kombucha. So my sort of instructions and learning about this stuff has always said that you only ever want to use black tea or green tea. I've only ever experimented with both of those, and they want to be as pure as possible. So if you do something with an Earl Grey, it's got bergamot, it's got other kinds of oils in there, and you can damage your kombucha mother. So you want to keep your kombucha nice and healthy. Can you get where can you get the mother? Where can you use the mother from? Can you use the mother from or reuse from store-bought kombucha bottle? So just have a look online. There's in every country there's people that can sell kombucha. I purchased this online from a local kombucha maker. It just came in a package sealed up with a bit of this beautiful biological raft of awesomeness, and a little bit of the old kombucha juice. And so you always want to reserve a little bit of the first tea to make the second batch. That just helps to kickstart it off. And so the idea is SCOBY is actually very similar to sourdough, a sourdough mother, and in the sense that you use it to continuously produce the product. So you have the mother, and you add, in this case, tea and sourdough more flour, and you break some off and you continuously use it. Different from kimchi, where you make a single fermented product within an environment, and then once that product's done, then that's it. With this sort of stuff, then you can continuously use it. Where do you get the last ingredient from, please? Which was the last ingredient? Oh, kefir. I just got that from the shops, from the supermarket, actually. You can absolutely find that. It's pretty common these days. If you're in Melbourne, then go to Terra Madre in Westgarth in Northcote. They've definitely got it there. They're really great. Or Piedamonte's supermarket up in Brunswick. I'm from the north side, so that's kind of where I would normally shop. Thank you. Oh, mostly just thank yous. Oh, that's so sweet. Thanks so much. Looks like a mushroom. It is, yeah. It's quite freaky actually, guys. It's when you look at it really close up, it's a little bit kind of weird, isn't it? It's this kind of floaty, fungi kind of thing, and it is very similar to a mushroom. It's got those properties in there. So super good, super delicious. What was the creamy dressing ingredient? That was the kefir, so the yogurt. The yogurt helps to sort of bind it all together and make that kind of creamy, delicious thing. Look, we are pretty much out of time, so I will say thank you so much for coming along. It's been an absolute joy talking with you over this past hour. We do have 2 more of these workshops. They're pretty much sold out, so I think we've got a sort of 180 and almost 200 booked already for the next 2, so there's just a few more tickets left, but I'd love to continue talking with you guys. So thanks for coming, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon. As always, I'll follow up with some recipes, and you'll have my email then, and if you've got any other questions, then you can absolutely just send them through. I love talking to you guys about this sort of stuff. So yeah, feel free to shoot me a message anytime. All right, thanks guys. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.